Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand spanking new edition of Cardinal Territory. Matt Holliday and Lance Lynn are out doing what wealthy folks do in their free time. But I'm here. I'm Jim Hayes. Kyle Gibson is here. And we have a special guest. Ryan Helsley joins Cardinal Territory today. Hello, Ryan.
Hells, what's up?
Thank you for
Going on
coming
there, buddy?
on.
Yeah,
And yeah, welcome. My first question is this. It's great to see you, by the way. Um,
good to
you
see
you
you.
set records as the closer with the Cardinals, right? And you go to New York, trade, and you're the setup guy. And suddenly, the role that you flourished and set the franchise record for saves is changed. So my question is, how much of an impact did that have on what happened in New York?
Yeah, obviously, when I got traded to New York, going into it, I knew wasn't going to be the closer. They have a guy there who's been pretty stinking good his whole career too, and has a lot of talent and had a great year. And so I knew I was going to kind of be a guy in that sixth, seventh, eighth inning slot. And had a great conversation with Mindy when I got there and the coaching staff, and so I knew what my role was. It was a little bit of an adjustment, figuring out your new, time slots to get ready and things like that. But overall, I felt great there, and the coaching staff was great, and my time there was good as a player. Could have done some things a little better, but I enjoyed my time there with the coaching staff and the players.
Hells, getting traded in the middle of the season, did it 21, traded to a contender, right? Traded to Philly. We're trying to make the playoffs. And I know the tough thing for me was I had a couple starts where I threw well, but really down the stretch, I didn't throw how I wanted to throw. And it's frustrating, right? You get brought to a team and you're this guy that's hopefully going to make a difference. Um, how'd that wear on you? How'd you deal with it? And I know the guys are great over there. I'm sure. I know Jeremy Hefner. He's a stud. Um, but how is overall that transition to a new team? Because I know in our conversations in 24, I think we were hoping that Ryan Helsley was a Cardinal his whole career, right? So, how is that transition, and how was that time with Hefner and those guys?
Yeah, I for sure wanted to be a Cardinal the whole time I was there. That's all I ever knew. I was there parts of 11 years, 7 years in the big leagues and 4 years in the minor leagues. And, um, I've had a lot of trade talks throughout my career there. And, where we were currently at before the trade deadline, just felt that that's what the Cardinals were going to do. So I think I saw the writing on the wall, like it wasn't a total shock when I got traded. So I think that helped. But being there in New York, the guys there, I had a lot of fun, and like you said, trying to make a difference. I don't know that I put any more pressure on myself, but I definitely expected a lot more of myself. While I was there, and felt good. I was healthy. Just obviously the results were bad. Started out good and had a tough 4 to 5 week stretch there and ended the year pretty well, but yeah, it's just a weird feeling being on such a good team, and you're making a push, and that's probably the most talent I've had on a team, top to bottom, and especially in a bullpen. I was the youngest guy in the bullpen, which is crazy to say. I'd never seen it. I was
Really?
30,
Wow.
30 31 years old, and I think I was the youngest guy in the bullpen. So we had a super vet bullpen, guys that pitched in World Series and all this and that. So that was cool to learn from those guys, and see baseball through a different lens, and such a big market in New York. And I mean, the fans were great. They're super dedicated there. Probably a lot like Philly fans, as you've experienced that. NL East rivalry and the crowds there, and it'll be exciting to see what they do this year. And but overall, I really enjoyed my time there.
From
Yeah.
a
So
from a
the huge. Whoa, Jim. You told me I'm asking the questions today. All right.
I,
You did.
I
You
thought we
told
were
me.
going back and forth.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Jim. Yeah, you're fine.
No,
You
you
got a
go. You
question? Go
go.
for it.
Go.
The real quick, and then I'll let Jim ask a question. Um, tell me about the different. What'd you like about New York? I mean, obviously you've been there multiple times, but how'd you get acclimated? What'd you and the family do? I'm a big fan of a pizza place over there in Brooklyn. That's a little bit
Yeah.
closer to Queens, but tell me
Yeah.
tell me what you guys did and how'd you like that?
Yeah, we didn't ever get to make it over there. I really tried, but dude, traffic in New York is a different beast. And we only had a couple off days while I was there, and I think we only had like one off day while we were at home. Um, but yeah, the traffic in New York is definitely makes you think twice about your plans every day. Especially on an off day, you're like, I'm gonna spend half my day trying to get here or get there, and we lived out on Long Island near Garden City, and it wasn't too bad. It was definitely different, a lot different than St. Louis, and um, I think overall that if we were to be able to pick a place to live, for a full season, getting traded during the middle of the year and trying to find a place to live is just so hectic. And it's really hard when you have a family and you've experienced, like, you got to move everything. And, it's just, there's so many things that people don't think about that you have to deal with. And, um, you know, it was just a hectic time, but I really enjoyed it there. And, we had an off day there and we took the family out to Central Park and got to do some, bluey stuff for the daughters. And I think my oldest daughter, she got to go to Danny Go. She got to watch him in concert. I think they skipped a game, one day game, went and watched Danny Go downtown in Manhattan. So my daughter loved the city. She every time she'd see the skyline, she's like, "We're going to the city." So she had a blast, and
That's
overall, I
awesome.
think our experience is pretty good. Yeah.
Now I have a two-part question. I say two to let Kyle know
Of
that there's
course,
another
it's
one
not one
coming.
question;
But
it's two questions. Okay, that's about right.
Kyle Gibson as a teammate, was he as bossy as he is as a member of this podcast? What was he like as a teammate?
No, Gibby was one of my, I think, favorite teammates of all time, and me and Kyle on the road. Once we got to know each other a little more, because obviously we only played together for 1 year, but every day on the road, unless one of us slept in, we'd go get coffee together. We'd walk around whatever city we were in. So those will be memories that I always hold on to, and something I tried to carry over, this year, and because it's fun, spending time with your teammates and getting to know them, and you spend way more time with them than you do with your families throughout the course of a year. So just trying to build that bond, and Gibby's going to be up on my list for a long time.
Now I'm going to stipulate that you guys are both pitchers, and I'm a mediocre broadcaster that really doesn't understand the nuances of this. So help me with this, if you would, Ryan. Okay. I know from interviewing guys like Izzy over the years that being a closer, there's a certain mental preparation, there's a certain mentality that you have to have. So my question to you is, I know you want to say all the right things, but how much of a mental change did you have to make going from the guy at the
Mhm.
end of the game, the guy who's going to get the ball to put the win in the win column, and then transition that to being a setup guy where you're not exactly sure, when you're coming in? How much of a mental change did you have to make?
Yeah, it was definitely a lot different, like you're so, as a closer, kind of weird to say, but throughout the season, you're so routine oriented, you have everything you do inning by inning, you start doing, like for me, I would go to the training room as soon as the game started, and innings 1 through 4, I was doing all my prep in there and try to get to the bullpen by the fifth inning, sit there for 1 inning, sixth inning. I'm starting my stretch routine with the Theragun. Seventh inning, I'm doing movements. Eighth inning, I'm doing my band. So like you're so regimen as a closer, and I think that helps you kind of get locked in and keep your focus. Because as a closer, your role is really defined, and I'm either throwing if the game's tied or if we're up by 3. Maybe 4 if I haven't pitched in a few days. But as a setup guy, it's like I could throw the fifth or sixth. I might get hot twice today, and maybe we go up by 5 or 6 in the ninth, and now I have the ninth. So it's definitely a lot different, and there's a lot more peaks and valleys out there, I think, as a setup guy. And with my time in New York, it not that I forgot what a setup guy was like, but it made me have more of an appreciation for what those guys do day in and day out, and kind of what they deal with on a daily basis, and just constantly having to stay ready and be ready for when the phone rings. But I think that's also a fun part of it, is kind of always living life on the edge. You're just sitting there itching, ready for a moment's notice, and you hear your name, and you shoot up. And but it's definitely a lot different going from that closer role to being a guy that could throw from innings 5 through 9.
All right, so Jim's going to ask all the baseball questions. Just typical media guy here, trying to get baseball insight. That's perfect. Great timing. What's the coffee you got this morning? What's your coffee spot? You're on the West Coast right now. What'd you go with this morning? Because like Hell said, we did a lot of coffee runs in the morning, kind of getting our day started, and definitely some of my favorite times in my career from 2024 was doing that and finding those coffee shops. So where'd you go this morning, and what's
Uh,
getting you ready for this golf match?
So this is called a place called Fairgrounds. It's up here
Mm,
in Beverly Hills. It's pretty good. I think it's more of I don't really know like my roast yet. It tastes a little darker. I just know if I like it, if it tastes good, it's a solid. I'll give it like an 8 out of 10. Not my favorite, but it's getting the job done. And I'm
yep,
sticking with the quad shot here. Gibby got me on that.
that's what I'm talking about.
Used to be a flavor guy, get some vanilla syrup in there, but I grew up a little bit and weaned myself off all the flavorings and sugars, so enjoying the coffee flavor a little bit more.
It
And
does happen to everybody. Everybody grows up at some point, Hells, and then you start, drinking your straight gasoline in the morning. So that's good. Fairgrounds.
yeah,
That's a unique name. I like that. I like that.
yeah.
And so in your time in New York, we went to a couple, but we were more in the city. What were those spots that
Mhm.
you found where you guys live? Did you find a good one?
Yeah, we would go to a place. I think it was what was the place we went to? Common Grounds or what was it?
Common Grounds. Yeah, there's a one called the
Yeah,
Black Fox as well
yeah,
in New York that I've been to.
yeah. We went to Common Grounds. It was south of Garden City.
Cool.
So every morning we'd do that and go find a playground, for the girls to play on and just get out of the house and spend some family time together. But when I got to New York, I think my caffeine intake like tripled, dude. They had the they they had the La Marzocco. You've seen that brand, right? Like all the coffee shop
Yep.
brands, the Italian brand.
Yep.
So they had the really nice like home setups in the weight room, and they traveled with one on the road. So it was
Oh,
like you just had the best coffee at your fingertips all day long. So like, how could you not just ingest 1,000 milligrams of coffee, every single day? So I was for sure
yeah.
caffeinated my time in New York.
You
Yep.
are watching Coffee Talk on this edition of Cardinal Territory. We'll be back with more in just a minute.
This episode of FT is brought to you by Square. Your favorite neighborhood spots run on Square. Give me an example in Pennsylvania, Kratz.
Right down the street from my house, the Tap House. Not only is it an awesome place to hang out, get your beers, get your drinks, whatever it is, but you know what? The company has the simplicity of Square, and they give back to the community with 10% of all the proceeds that they bring in going back to community projects.
I love it. Sports and sports bars are so good at bringing together local communities, and you can actually take this ad as an excuse to go support your local spot and have yourself a day or a weekend in the neighborhood. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. These businesses are what make the neighborhood the neighborhood. So visit square.com/go/foul to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square. See you in the neighborhood. Again, that's square.com/go/foul to learn more.
Back with Cardinal Territory, our guest is Ryan Helsley. And since I have control, I'm going to fire out a quick question here. Ryan, you're a free agent now. What's that process like for you? Like, how does that work? Does your agent like give you updates that you're getting a nibble here? How does that work? And what's it been like for you?
Yeah, it's pretty surreal to be here. I know it's a blessing, and not a whole lot of players get to experience free agency. So I'm definitely excited and thankful. And my agents will text me every other day maybe, because I think the GM meetings are going on right now, so talks and stuff have picked up a little bit. And I like to I've called it window shopping so far. It's like teams will say they like you, and but there's hasn't been real numbers talk or anything like that yet, which I think that obviously pick up as the offseason goes on. And but overall it's pretty cool. It's crazy to be here in this moment, to be here 7 years down the road, and have an opportunity to hopefully have an opportunity to pick where you play, and have multiple options.
What one thing that Brian Dozier told me kind of going into my last year in Minnesota, he had just become a free agent. He's like, Gibby, don't be afraid of free agency. Like, enjoy the process, take it in. I was fortunate to go through it a few times. How are you and the family dealing with it? What are those conversations like? You don't have to let us in on all of it, obviously, but
Right.
it is an exciting time. But I mean, I know, especially for me last year, a little bit. It set in as time went on, and I didn't have a job. It's like, man, all right, maybe this is it. Now, obviously, you're not going to be in that situation. But are you guys kind of just waiting on a little bit of what are these opportunities, or do you guys kind of have those talks of, man, we'd really like to be here with that group?
Yeah, I think it's natural to want to be somewhere, but I also think, for me, I'm trying to go into it as open minded and like willing to play anywhere, so you're not like, disheartened if you don't go to the place you want to go to, so to say. So really just going into it with an open mind, and it's an exciting time. And, um, a lot of teams that are looking for back end guys are bigger market teams. So, I think a lot of that stuff is exciting and appealing to my wife and daughter who love the big Apple City, as she called it, in New York. So, but selfishly, I'd love to stay close to home. Like Texas, maybe a reunion with the Cardinals. Kansas City, just because I have a lot of family members who like to travel, and obviously the further you are away from Oklahoma, it's a little harder to travel and a little more expensive than driving. So, but obviously, I'm open to playing, anywhere, and just want to compete.
Are you hoping that the Cardinals come a calling? By the way, the kids say they call it getting the bag. So wherever you end up, you're getting the bag. But are you hopeful?
I
Are you
apologize for
hopeful?
Jim. I apologize. He does this to Lance and Matt, and sometimes me, more of those guys, because they have a bigger bag than I have. So I mean, he does this to
I'm jealous
everybody every show. So I apologize that he does this. All right, go ahead,
because
Helps.
I'm jealous. But is that in your mind a possible reality that the Cardinals start, as you say, window shopping, maybe kicking the tires on a return?
Um, I think I would expect them to reach out. I think I don't know if it'll be serious, but maybe to check in and kind of gauge the waters, so to speak. And I had a good talk with Heim after I was traded, and it was really encouraging on possibly maybe coming back there. And obviously things changed. That was 3 months ago, but um, I really enjoyed my time getting to know Heim a little bit, and think that the Cardinals' future is in really good hands with him.
So let's dive into some of that Cardinals time, right? This is Cardinals territory, so I guess Jim probably wouldn't be too happy if we don't bring up the Cardinals, other than possibly coming back. But what were some of those moments with the Cardinals that stand out? I mean, like you said, 7 seasons, sub three, all stars. I mean, just you accomplished just about everything, right? So tell us about that time in St. Louis. What are you going to remember most if for any reason, that reunion doesn't happen at some point in the future?
Yeah, I think obviously, my rookie year stands out. Obviously everything's so new that year, and we made it to the NLCS, so we made a deep playoff run. Obviously we got swept by the Nats, but we made the playoffs my first 4 years. And it's kind of crazy as a player, you kind of take that for granted sometimes. Then when you don't make it a couple times, you realize how hard it really is to make the postseason, even with so many teams getting in now. The league is just so competitive, and I think the talent gap is probably the smallest it's ever been. And it's just, things like that, make the game fun. And making the playoffs is just a surreal feeling. And, obviously I think 22 stands out. Was the first year I really kind of stepped onto the scene and, you know, pitched how I wanted to, and kind of became, Ryan Helsley to the baseball world. And, through immaculate inning that year, got to play with Albert, Yachty, and Wayno. So that season's always super special. And we clinched the NL Central that year. And one of my favorite pictures was when we clinched in Milwaukee with Wayno, Yachty, and Albert. Just kind of the pillars of Cardinals baseball the last 20 plus years. And guys I grew up watching. So that I felt like a kid in that moment, just to and a fan. Being a part of that team. And just getting to sit there and just kind of cherish that and take it all in. And then the longer you get to play, it's like you don't want to admit that you're getting older. You're that old guy in the locker room, but like it's like every time you show up to spring, it's like in 23, like dang, Yachty's not here, Albert's not here, and then 24, Wayno's not here. So it's pretty crazy, and also a blessing, obviously, the longer you play. But and 24 is obviously really special too. Just getting to pitch all year and having 49 saves and just being a part of, such a storied franchise with so many good players. And, there's a lot in there to really take in and, to hold on to.
Ryan, by the way, great guy. I'm going to tell you a little story. So I'm doing the post game interview for Helsley. He gets a save. It was like save 14 that season. And he's holding on to the ball. And I'm thinking maybe it has some significance. So I just said, "Hey, does that ball have some significance?" He goes, "No, I'm just holding it." He goes, "You want to give it to your son?" So my son has save 14 one season for Ryan Helsley. But Ryan, you're seeing Kyle Gibson shine right now as a host because he's asking questions probably better than me. So kudos to you. But this is where skill comes into play. I talk about the bag, right? The wealth, and I'm a little jealous of, the professional athletes. I don't have the kind of money, but watch me translate this into a live read for a sponsor. So the finances I do have, as minuscule as they are, I'm a mess. I don't know where my money's going. And that's where Monarch Money came into play for me. It's an all in one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean interface on your laptop, on your phone, basically wherever. And right now, just for our viewers, Monarch is offering 50% off its first year with code THECAT at monarch.com. All your finances in one convenient, manageable place. No more trying to play detective figuring out what app to check. It's all in one. And you can even get a financial advisor at no extra cost. Don't let this opportunity slip through your fingers. Use code THECAT at monarch.com. 50% off the first year. Monarch.com. Code THECAT.
Kratz Pop Quiz. What has 35 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, 27 essential vitamins and minerals, comes in excellent flavors like, of course, chocolate, vanilla, but chocolate peanut butter, my favorite. No added sugar, gluten-free, under $5 per meal, and is ready to drink.
Go out the house, get yourself a Huel. Look at you. You even have one right there. Ready to smack that, John? Ugh, chocolate peanut butter, chocolate, and vanilla. Deliciosos.
Also, there is a new Daily Greens ready to drink, 42 vitamins, minerals, and superfoods. Only 25 calories on that one, 4 grams of fiber. There's flavors like blueberry, apple, peach. Huel makes healthy eating simple. They also just launched into Target stores nationwide. Try both products today with 15% off your purchase for new customers with the code FOUL at huel.com/FOUL. Use that code FOUL and fill out the post-checkout survey to help support FT.
Foul territory, guys, get the free stuff. We don't on Cardinal Territory. We'll work on that, though. With Ryan Helsley. Ryan, I want to ask you, like, when you got traded, right? The Cardinals put stock in a lot of the young guys in the bullpen. You know them very well. Guys like Swanson, Leahy, O'Brien, really, really good. Of course, JoJo. I want to ask you particularly about like Swanson, who became dominant. Did you know that these guys were ready to take the next step back when you were part of the team?
Yeah, so I met Swanson in 23 when I was rehabbing in Springfield. He'd just gotten traded over from, I believe, the Blue Jays. And I saw him then. He was a big kid and kind of funky, and kind of a steep approach it seemed like with the heavy sinker. And he obviously threw hard, and he had a great year last year in Double A. I think he led the league and with saves with that. And the stuff was there. You saw it as soon as he came up. Throwing 97, 98, and with two really good off-speed pitches and. He tacked his zone well, all the things you need to do as a bullpen guy, and just the way he carries himself. You kind of had an idea that this guy could, be a contributor, and I think they saw that down the stretch this year. And I was always a big believer in Riley O'Brien. For seeing him last year too. I know in 24 he didn't pitch how he wanted to, but I'd always tell the coaching staff like this guy's going to be good. Just give him some time, and you see it with all players. Not everybody makes that leap or figures it out, as fast as they want to or as quick as everybody thinks they should. But, I think he figured it out a little bit this year and, saw what he was capable of. And, JoJo's had a great year. We know what he's capable of. And, I think it was cool to watch Kyle really flourish this year. And, I don't think he gets enough credit for what he really did with, how many different roles and situations he pitched in and played. And, like I said earlier, it's hard not knowing when you're going to throw. And he would throw one inning one night, up in the eighth by one, or throw four the next day down by seven, So just having that wide range and to be able to pitch and compete and get the results that he did this year, hats off to him. And I think it's something he could be proud of and, build off of.
So we've talked a few times on here over the last couple of weeks just about what the Cardinals might do and what that looks like in Heim's first year. But one thing that I brought up is preventing runs is always less expensive than scoring runs, right? So, and a bullpen can be a big part of that. And, in 2024, that bullpen that we had was one of the main reasons, if not the reason, that we were in playoff contention for so long. So, in that bullpen that they have now, we'll just assume you're not there. Who's that guy that kind of steps up as that veteran leadership? Because I feel like Kittredge, you guys had some guys down there in 24 that really led that group, and then you led that group, last year until the trade deadline. But who are those guys that can kind of step into that role, assuming they don't bring somebody in, and keep that to be a strength of this year's team?
Yeah, I think we see how teams use bullpens now, and most good teams I feel like have two closers, so to call it, especially in the playoffs. You see how quick triggers are for starters, and but for the Cardinals, I think it's got to be JoJo, and even though Riley's a little less time wise in the big leagues, he's a little bit older and seasoned as a baseball player, so I think those two guys could be someone that could lead that bullpen. But I think the easy choice is JoJo, just because he's been around so long and has pitched well, his whole career. And a lot of young guys are going to get more opportunities there if they don't sign guys, which I think it would be a good thing to see what they have and see what those guys are capable of at that level.
Sorry, I'm stepping in here, Jim. You did a two-part earlier, so I'm going to go ahead and do back follow-up here. And then I really want to ask about golf here. We're going to run out of time with Ryan, but I really want to know where he's golfing today. So this might be the last question, Jim. So I'm going
You
to
can
take
do
the
two
last
parts.
few
You
here.
can do two parts.
Thanks for that. Permission to do that. Riley, what was a big shift that you saw in Riley? When I was in AAA with the Rays, kind of working back, I saw him throw against us, and my word, it was kind of a different guy. What did you
Yeah.
see from him when he got back up there, and what's going to make him so effective going forward, do you think?
Yeah, I think just trusting his stuff in the zone. I think that's the hardest thing to do in the big leagues. Even the best guys get out. We talk about it all the time in pitchers meetings. Is 7 out of 10 times, first pitch strikes are, the key. And I think when he really bought into just attacking guys and, trusting his stuff in the zone is when he really saw a big jump. And, confidence as a pitcher can take you a long way, especially in the bullpen, um, good or bad, and when you have those bad games, it's, you know, hard to sometimes get past those. And I think when you rattle off a few good ones and you can kind of see like how your success happens, I think is a big way and a big contributor to success overall for a player. And, I think this year, I would watch Cardinals games when I left, and, he's pitching in close games and, just like you said, look like a completely different pitcher and confident. And, it's fun to watch guys, make that leap and, just to really compete out there and just to lay it all on the line.
Ask about golf.
Jim, go ahead. Oh, did you have another question, Jim?
No, so I was going to let you ask golf, then I was going to close
Okay,
out with one, and we'd wrap this whole
perfect.
puppy up.
Okay, all right, great. So obviously, Hells, you got the hat that has the upside down words on it. So you're obviously going golfing. It says birdies for those that can't read upside down. So hope you score a lot of birdies today. That'd be great. Where are you going golfing? Tell us the schedule. We already know that you're caffeinated, ready to go. But where are we going golfing today?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go to Bel Air today to start off with, and then maybe try to sneak on to LA Country Club as well. So a lot of
Yeah, not
projected
sure
rain.
that's a place you can sneak on. So I wouldn't try to sneak on at LA Country Club. Just
We
saying.
might pull some strings and get in. That's bad. That's bad phrasing there. But yeah, I think today's just going to be complete golf, maybe 36 holes, and we'll see if we can't score some birdies.
That's
Nice.
awesome,
Now
man. That's awesome.
I'm gonna do what Kyle was doing early. This isn't a baseball related question. By the way, Kyle, you were great. He's the guy that booked Helsley for today. So kudos to Kyle Gibson. But we're talking about LA right now. We're talking about the Big Apple. I want to know what you miss about St. Louis.
Yeah, I think I just always explain it to people. It kind of feels like home for me. I grew up in a small town, and you grow up there and get there at a 4-year-old kid, and I left at 31, so matured a lot and seen a lot there, and it just feels like a big farm town to me. There's not much traffic really. It just everything's kind of spread out and easy going. It's just a slower pace of life, and that it just felt like home to me and what I was used to and what I knew. The people are great, the fans are great. It's a hard place not to like, honestly.
Kyle, you were great. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Ryan
Peter.
Helsley, thank you for joining us. Hopefully, you have a very happy landing spot as free agency comes to a close for you. And that's going to do it for this edition of Cardinal Territory. We'll see you next time. Hopefully, that edition won't suck.